WESN.
Hello there, and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you very much for joining us for this edition of the program. Well, Budget 2024-2025 is just around the corner. In a couple of days' time, the Minister of Finance will present to the nation the report as to where we are in terms of our economy, and hopefully that report inspires confidence in investors and in the citizens of TNT. Now, just bear in mind that a budget statement does not necessarily give all the figures. It gives an idea as to where we are at and to where the government intends to spend and invest based on projections. Now, this has also been a challenge over the last few years because it is often suggested that the Minister of Finance, he tends to overestimate when it comes to natural gas prices and oil prices. But that is a conversation for later on. This morning, let us get into a conversation as per what Trinidad and Tobago needs. Too often, the question is asked, what do you expect? What do you want? Yeah, so forget expectations for the moment. What is it that Trinidad and Tobago needs at this particular point, given where we are as a nation, and given all the global pressures that are associated with our economy? I'm joined this morning by economist Dr. Varnish James. Good morning, Dr. James, and welcome back to the program. Good to see you.
Morning, Keaton.
Well, thank you very much indeed for being with us. So let me start. Last year, the Minister of Finance, during his presentation, described Trinidad and Tobago as an economy in distress. 1 year later, has that description changed?
Not really, for the main reason that he anticipated, based on the evidence he had at the time, that the economy would be supported by an oil price of about $85 per barrel. And if you've been following the evidence, that was not realized pretty much throughout the year. For the early part, it did, but now, for example, it's somewhere near $71. That's Brent. West Texas would be below that, somewhere near $69 in that area there. So, that alone would be the source of a lot of stress for the economy, because the government revenues would be severely challenged.
But in that respect, the government has also made an argument that the non-energy manufacturing sector, it's grown, and it's what's propping up our energy sector at this particular point of time. In fact, Central Bank recently indicated that the energy sector is down by 10%. But the government has argued, hold on, non-energy manufacturing, well, that's on the rise.
Yeah, but that doesn't drive the economy in the way that it needs to be driven, with the massive surpluses you need in order to transform the dynamics of the rest of the economy. That sector is not heavily integrated into the rest of the economy. It generates, in any case, only a small portion of the foreign exchange we need. That's why we've had a foreign exchange crunch all year. And this is an import-dependent economy. And as long as you miss the huge surpluses that used to be contributed by oil and gas, you would find it very difficult to drive a widespread investment program to diversify the economy. So in any event, no matter what is happening in manufacturing, which isn't what it's portrayed to be from a development standpoint, you will have an economy under stress once oil and gas is under stress, unless you do the kinds of things required to diversify and develop. That hasn't been done, so we're still in trouble.
Well, clearly export capital is an area that needs quite a lot of focus. Where can Trinidad and Tobago look at this particular point for such?
You said export capital?
Yes.
Exports. Export diversification. Yeah, because exports of capital intensive and capital output, that's really the direction in which you have to live. And that means ultimately you have to pay attention to the development potential of a place like Tobago, for example, where you have huge potential underutilized for education exports and healthcare exports on the tourism platform
Mhm.
and the creative industry exports as well. Of course, related to that, the housing package and stuff like that. So we've not done much there. The government over here is completely lost in that regard. And so the development dynamic that the country has available to it from this angle is not being exploited. That's on the one hand. And of course, it's not being exploited in the case of Trinidad itself. And don't forget the damaging effect on diversifying investments from abroad that crime is having in the country generally. So you have to be looking in the direction I'm talking about. But in that direction, you could only look if you bring crime under control.
In that regard, before I get to the point of crime, could Tobago and its potential, does it have that potential, the capacity to earn enough foreign exchange for Trinidad and Tobago, not just for the island of Tobago?
Correct. The bulk of the development potential, in my view, of the economy that really ultimately has to hang on an industrialized tourism package uh, it resides in Tobago. But with the nonsense we're doing here and in the country as a whole, both with respect to crime and in respect to the content of development strategy, we're leaving that potential on them, underexploited. I mean, the potential is similar to what you're seeing in Cayman and in Bermuda. It doesn't have to be in financial services. It could be in the other capital export services, professional services, and so on. But you have to understand what you're doing, make deliberate strategy, put deliberate sound strategy in place. And that could only be done with a different kind of approach, a different kind of governance model, and all of those kinds of things. So we're missing out on the opportunity because of the way we do things, both in Tobago and in Trinidad and Tobago. Still, that is the direction in which we are going to have to go. It's no different. It's the same direction in which Jamaica has to go, for example. They have the same problem of autocratic executive government that's blocking some policy making, limited information policy making. That's the heart of the problem of diversification when all is said and done. And that ties to the underdevelopment of our communities, which is where all the innovative capabilities have resided throughout our history. Throughout our history, as in from slavery and strict indenture to today. So when you think about what the potential is, where it resides, and the structure of decision making that we have in place, structure of governance and so on, what you would find is we're leaving the underlying potential, the real potential of our people underexploited.
Not to jump too far ahead, but you just spoke of limited information policy making. That speaks to data collection and data capturing. Is that an issue that we have in Tobago right now? Is that also what
Major,
is contributing to our issues?
major issue. It's the biggest issue. It's the reason policing doesn't work, for example. And the fundamental problem with it is that you have government set up as executive government. So we have no systems of information gathering outside of what the CSO is doing on the administrative data. The data that really drives development in almost any economy is the data in the hands of the ordinary citizen who is trying to do stuff. And you need to know what they're trying to do, what help they need, when they need it, how much they need, and so on. And they have to tell you that. They can't tell you that through the CSO. They have to tell you that through properly structured, inclusive hearings from all citizens. That is only possible if you design the government differently, so that
Mm.
the legislature is going to work every day, not to long eye the cabinet and try to get in there, but rather to get the citizens into a conversation. That's the effective function of a legislature, and our legislature is not designed for that. The opposition isn't there to help with the data gathering process from you and me. There are no non-executive members on the winning side to lead the process. So the government is just dysfunctionally set up. And this point has been completely missed by the committee set up by the executive committee set up by Dr. Rowley. So, we're in big trouble with this design. But as I said, it's the same in St. Lucia, it's the same in Jamaica, it's the same in Belize, in Suriname, all over the Caribbean. We have inherited this mess, and we have not had the wisdom and the knowledge to think it through and go for broke and set up ourselves properly so we could talk to one another and make some decisions by having the full flow of information beyond what statistics can give you.
What you've just done, Dr. James, is essentially link constitutional reform to our economy and our financial position as well. And you're correct. I don't think that was addressed clearly by the Constitutional Reform Committee, the advisory committee that was set up by the Prime Minister. So therefore, it's a missed opportunity.
It is, and it's the reason it's missed is the very design of the committee itself. I mean, you have a committee, for example, that is reporting on the independence of the judiciary. The judiciary exists in the country today, and it wasn't part of the committee. It wasn't present. It's not there to tell us what the issues are. You're making pronouncements about whether we should move from the Privy Council or not. You don't ask them. They're the ones who are dealing with the interference from the executive and so on. Well, what do they think? You don't know. What does the opposition think? They're not involved. I mean, Kamala and her team is in the parliament. They are not they were not part. They had no representatives on this committee. The THA is running government into it, not represented on the committee. So what are we talking about here? Executive government. That's the problem with executive government. It has a narrow lens on anything that it is controlling and deciding on. It operates on limited information, and this committee's work is an example of that. But the policing is an example of that. It's the same problem with policing. Policing needs full information, but the police suffer from the same alienation that limits the information flow to the Ministry of Education, to the Ministry of Health, to the whole government system, including policing, is designed around a limited, alienated flow of information. And once that is so, you can't make sound decisions. And if you have an economy like Trinidad, you can't diversify without sound decisions, inclusive full information decisions. Knowing who to help, when to help, how much to help, all that requires more data than you could get from a CSO. That's the problem. That's the heart of our diversification problem. And most importantly, the initiatives that drove our survival over the last 100 years all those initiatives, the evolution of roti and all the key innovations in our society, music, pan, right? Chutney and so on, came from the communities. And once you don't have them with a clear voice to tell you what they're doing, how they're doing it, why they need help, if they need help, what encouragement, what policies to support, if you don't have that information from them, you can't know what to do. And you can't get it from them as they are currently constituted. They're not part of government. You have these silly things called village councils that have no use really when you're thinking in terms of strategic development initiatives. And we keep fooling ourselves with them forever. And this committee, for example, has ignored that fact, even though the people of Tobago told them so in no uncertain terms. You got to bring government to the community level in Pamis, in Laventil, in Chaguanas, properly, so they have the authority to organize themselves, organize entrepreneurship, support entrepreneurs, tackle crime, all of those kinds of things are best done at the community level. So there's a huge pool of entrepreneurial potential that would drive development that we are simply leaving out because of poor governance.
It's not for the first time, but you have me in a position of questioning the whole idea of representation by members of parliament within Parliament and TNT, given what you said. Based off of the points that you put across, the potential exists, but we have missed that completely. Whether or not it is on purpose or whether or not it is totally because we don't necessarily see the value in it. But it's a very good point that you've raised there, Dr. James. I want to pull it back to another point that you were making earlier, and that is in respect to our crime situation and how it affects the economy. Usually, there's this notion that the state of economy actually contributes and leads to a surge in crime and criminal activity. It seems to be happening the other way now, where the criminal activity and the elements that exist are leading us to a declining economy. Last year, the Minister of Finance allocated approximately $6.92 billion to national security. That was last year. Now, bear in mind, whether or not national security got that entire figure, it's something questionable in itself. But he also mentioned tripling the recruitment for the TTPS to 1,000 officers annually. Also mentioned $90 million for 4 new scanners. I don't know the status of that at this particular point in time. And $80 million extra for vehicles. With that was stated last year. Why is it that still we can't seem to get anywhere in relation to crime and its effects on our economy? It's really most alarming and concerning to say the very least.
Well, because you're talking about doing the wrong thing to solve a problem. The fundamental problems of crime they are rooted in the way the communities work. Criminals live in real communities. They grow up there. The people in the communities, the families, and so on, see the problems as they are evolving with the children. Most of the crime, of course, here as in Jamaica, so, the young people. And when you look at it, you could see that the seed of the problem rests in the way people grow up, right? Communities could see the problems evolving and can't do anything about it because they lack the authority. If you don't fix that, it doesn't matter how much money. We have evidence of this in Jamaica. They've been fighting this problem of crime a little bit longer in terms of the scale than we have been. And they've made no progress. And the reason they've made no progress is they're just as authoritarian a system as ours. You have Dr. Rowley and his team trying to know what to do about crime and policing from cabinet. You can't know. You don't know the facts. You just don't know enough to make proper decisions. So you could put 10 billion, you could put 20 billion, you could put 2,000 police officers. It will make no difference. We're dealing with the wrong interpretation of the problem we have. As long as you don't get that right, how do you know what to do to fix it? You can't know. You just don't have enough information because of how you're doing things, because of who is making the decisions. Security at the community level, for example, could be better done at the community level, but policing in the sense of crime prevention.
I think we just lost Dr. James with us there. He seems to have been frozen. Tends to happen now and again, ladies and gentlemen. Technology, as I mentioned.
Catch people when they're children.
Dr. James, sorry if I may just interject. We lost you there for a moment when you were actually elaborating on the point of security within the community. If you can just continue from that point.
Yeah, what I was saying is what the government is doing is tackling the wrong problem. It's not the number of police running around with trucks and cars and so on, vans, chasing criminals and scaring people by saying, I'm present, so don't commit crime. That's not the way you deal with real crime. You deal with real crime by going to the root causes where people are seen as they are children growing up and you see the tendencies to deviance and you tackle it early. These are things we have actually seen in the country where you tackle the orientation of a child. You educate, you re-educate, the community comes in, you raise the child properly as a community, as you reach in and help the families and so on. Those are the things that you have to do. Fix the education system properly. The communities will know better what kinds of education systems will work best, not the Ministry of Education. That sort of stuff is what you have to do to fix crime, to deal with crime, liberate the people from criminality at the community level, and you get it done at the country level. The way we're doing it now, you could put 10 million, 10 billion, 20 billion in policing, and you still won't get it done. And that failure will amount to failure to activate the entrepreneurial potential to drive development.
And it's interesting because this is a point that the minister himself spoke of last year when the employment generating capacity in itself has declined, and the government recognized, hold on, at least this is what he said. We need to do something to stimulate this for the issue of development because younger people entering the workforce in TNT is declining. In fact, working lives are becoming longer. So this culture of entrepreneurship, we have not even created a framework for it, though we recognize it's an issue.
Exactly. And to be quite frank, there are in an economy like Trinidad and Tobago, entrepreneurial initiatives at the government level would be important to the diversification and development program. Uh, there are two kinds of ways you have to think about that. One is through the actual entrepreneurship done by the community or by the local government. Government is not only central government that could own and do investment in oil and gas and so on. What if Lavantil had power? If the people in Lavantil had power, they would do something different with PAN. They would have the best music school in the country, for example. Right? Now, if they don't have power, then you end up with what you have, which is a development potential along the creative industry track, which we have underexploited. What we have failed to do in the country is to recognize that communities can be both entrepreneurs and can support entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs live in communities. If you look at the fishing industry in Tobago, for example, which is producing a huge set of fish, what would happen if the communities had the power to support the fisher folk in their landing sites with infrastructure and other things? They know, they see the thing. They would help to develop the fisher folk in their communities. But also, if they saw the potential, they could invest in large-scale motherships to roam the Caribbean waters under the CARICOM Treaty and do better than they're doing now. Now, that potential is left untouched because they don't have the power and the authority and the share in the budget to make those kinds of wise choices. Same problem with Lavantil, no? Same phenomenon. So you could see that the design of government that we're working with is a barrier to diversification and development. And you don't need Trinidad and Tobago as proof of it. Look at every Caribbean island, and they all suffer from the same thing, excessive dependence on one industry. And all of that comes because the industry is the one that the government keeps an eye on: oil and gas in Trinidad and Tobago, tourism in St. Lucia, tourism in Jamaica, non-diversifying activity. If you look at what Cayman and Bermuda are doing, it's the private sector that drove the development of their financial services industry, the local and global private sector. That's where you have to see the potential, just like you've seen it in manufacturing. It's not government manufacturing that is driving manufacturing in China. It's private sector manufacturing. Government helps. Okay, that's just manufacturing. That's not the only industry we could focus on. We could do much better with tourism if we had creative tourism like in the Castara model, where you have a safe zone, a healthy zone, an integrated link to your fishing industry, and so on. That model of the blue zone type of stuff you see in Loma Linda in California, that's the kind of way we have to think about tourism. And you're not there. You're not there only because the kind of Loma Linda initiative that you have to be thinking about could only be done at the community level, by the communities. They're the ones who are going to secure their guests, treat them well, encourage them to spend 6 months rather than 6 days, rather than coming to go to the beach, come and do remote working and live, even if they're earning their income in London. That's the sort of thing that is possible. But we can't do it because we've locked our communities down with the millstone of central, over-centralized executive authoritarian government. It's a big problem. And we have to have the vision and the wisdom to understand it and deal with it. Otherwise, we will never transform these economies.
It's
And every
amazing.
year we'll grumble about oil price. Every year.
Exactly, and it's amazing, isn't it, how this is all linked in respect to a chain reaction. Not only does this put a strain on the government and the economy, and also with our workforce declining and working lives becoming longer, with inflation as well, bearing in mind that it also declines the purchasing power of households because of the declining value of incomes. All of this is linked. But I'm curious to know as well, how does this affect consumerism? Because we are so, as you mentioned, we're talking about oil and gas all the time. We're looking at that as our main source of foreign exchange. But we've become so heavily reliant on foreign exchange because we have not developed the potential that exists for domestic markets. How much of this is going to be an issue in the long term in respect to consumerism and TNT?
Well, you see the evidence right there in front of you. And every year the minister presents the budget, he complains about agriculture. He complains about agriculture, forestry, and fishing. Well, if you understand the sector that really could drive diversification has two parts. One part, which produces the capital services, the professional services and goods and so on. But another part is the part that produces consumer goods and services, agricultural output and so on. If you want to develop, you have to raise productivity in the generation of the agricultural outputs, the fishing outputs and so on. Let output grow, but it must, the capital part, the part that creates capacity must grow faster. So it's not that agriculture mustn't grow and develop. It's just that you need the capital services part of our economy to grow even faster. That capital services is not what you're doing when you're producing manufacturing output. So you're missing the boat. Manufacturing output is just at the consumer part, even if you're exporting something. We need the capital services to be developing even faster than the manufacturing sector. That is education for export, healthcare for export. What we had in mind with the exporting of medical services from the Cuba Hospital, Children's Hospital, and so that idea is the idea that you have to pursue across the capital services, professional services, consulting services, and so on. And you have to understand that that has to be the fastest developing component of the economy, even though you get your agriculture to grow and productivity in agriculture to grow, productivity in fishing to grow, and so on. Once we don't understand that and understand the economy that way, the main thrust of diversification and development will be missed completely. And every year, the citizens think about the budget, the budget, the budget, and every year the budget misses that fundamental issue. So why does it? Because of the system. Because the communities can't tell you anything. Local government can't tell you anything. The structure of the decision-making system that we are running locks out the information we need to know what to do to develop and diversify. That's why we haven't facilitated diversification and development. We keep looking to the central government. We're looking in the wrong place. It's the same thing with crime. We're looking in the wrong place for the information and the activities and the initiatives that could bring crime under control. Same for the economy. Same for education. Every year, for example, we face the fact that we're running an academic education system in a world that requires increasingly skill-intensive education. You can't know that from the level of the Ministry of Education. You have to know that when you're seeing children growing up and you see one child with an academic orientation and another child with a skill orientation. This person could play cricket. or football or something like that, and you say, what do we do to provide education for that kind of child? We provide the education for 30-35% of those who go into the system. This is a system built for everybody to succeed. 30-35% succeed every year. And we can't see that the real reason for it is that the information about the capacities children are bringing that they need developing is not flowing to the right places where steps could be taken. Why? The structure of the decision making about education and educational intervention is the wrong structure. The Ministry of Education can't do it. The THA Division of Education can't do it. It has to be done where people live. That's where you know when a child is 4 or 5 years old, what kind of child you have. You have children, I have children. That's when I knew. I knew, watch my children growing up and know what kind of child I have. I say, okay, I'll go help you to get yourself into law. I'll go help you to get yourself into fashion and so on. And that's how your children succeed. And if your child comes to you and say, I want to become a fashionista, you don't say, no, go and do medicine. You have to understand what you're dealing with by living there and being present. That's the problem created by the system of government we're running. If we don't fix that, we can't make any progress with the economy, with crime, with the sociology, community development, economic development, whatever you want. Whatever you want.
You see, it's interesting that you mentioned that okay, the system in its current state only 30 to 35% are passing every year. And then I'm questioning, okay, if that's the case, what's happening to the 65-70% that are
Exactly.
not? They're lost in the system. Again, we speak about a development capacity and a declining workforce. But it also makes me wonder, is this where social expenditure has become so much of every year, no matter what, social expenditure is propped, where you see other ministries receiving constant declines in allocation. For example, agriculture only got 1.165 billion last year, right? And that's probably just for recurrent expenditure, not for development expenditure. So if that is the case, social expenditure, this is where all the money is going to the 65-70% that are being lost in the system or because of the system.
You have to give handouts to it. If if of the 60% who only partially make it through the education system, if only 5 or 10% of those turn to crime, you can't live in this society because these will be informed people. You have 12, 15,000 unemployed people in the country. And if 20% of those people decide they're going to look for their money through crime, these will be a lot of people that will be among them who have first degrees, who have A levels, right? And so on. You could only absorb those properly in a developing economy. You have this fundamental problem that if the school system is creating people who are clever, they're not uneducated in the sense that they didn't pass exams. They're uneducated in the sense that they're not given the credentials and skills required to fit properly into the economy. And when you have that, that doesn't mean they can't do good crime. So what you're going to have in Iran is smarter people than the police. Remember, we don't really educate our police properly in the country too. Don't forget that. That's another angle to the thing. We don't have a serious university. When I was a professor in New York City, I taught economics at John Jay College, College of Criminal Justice, servicing the New York policing system. The point I'm making is there are a whole range of things that we ought to be doing, which you cannot know to do because the information flow is not there. And when it is there, it goes just to the executive. The whole public service is funneled to the executive. Fundamentally, it's not funneled to the local government system and to the communities where real decisions have to be made for diversification. So you're wasting time, you're getting inadequate information. And when you get the inadequate information, it goes to the wrong place. This is just a system that is set up for failure rather than success.
Is it only through constitutional reform that this can be addressed, or could it be addressed through Parliament in the current structure of government?
Well, in a kind of way, some things can be done without constitutional reform. So, for example, in Tobago, where you have the most authoritarian government in the Caribbean is in Tobago, right? Yeah, because the executive council, you have 18, 19 people, and almost all of them except three are in the executive council. So this is complete authoritarianism. Okay. But they could decide tomorrow morning, without reference to constitutional reform, to set up the arrangements in Tobago that signal to the country how we want to organize ourselves for sound decision making. You have six committees, you empower them to provide oversight services to the THA and so on. Set them up, even though they're not inside the government, and say this is what we really ought to be doing. So information and agriculture will flow, information and education will flow because you set them up to call in the citizens and have a real conversation routinely that could report to the plenary. All of that sort of stuff could be done in Trinidad as well. It could be done in the national government. When Dr. Rowley wants to, doesn't he set up an advisory committee on this or an advisory committee on that and so on? But all of that is funneled on the executive. If you set it up in such a way that it is empowered to service the parliament, you begin to signal the structures of government that you need, and people will rally to that, participate in the process. I mean, people participated in this Constitution Reform Committee process, even though it was simply and solely appointed by the cabinet. This is a cabinet committee, and yet people participated. What if it was a committee serving the whole parliament? People would participate even if you didn't have the reform of the Constitution as yet. So we can do a lot without constitutional reform until we get there. But none of that could be understood and done if the orientation of the political class is to enjoy the taste of authoritarian government. Once you win power, you behave as though the opposition doesn't even belong in the parliament. We saw it under Kamala with Rowley, and we now see it under Rowley with Kamala. Rowley behaves as though Kamala shouldn't even bother to come. Don't waste your time coming to the parliament. I'm the boss. That sort of stuff. If you keep going down that road, you only hear what you want to hear. You are uninformed, inadequately informed, underinformed, and so on. And you can't make some decisions. And if you're running an economy like Trinidad, you only could develop with sound decisions, full information decisions. That's a fact of economics.
Well, Dr. James, I've kept you for quite some time. I'm going to keep you just a little bit longer because I need your thoughts on Tobago and focusing on Tobago for a bit. Last year, the Minister of Finance said that the what Farley Augustine presented in last year's budget from Tobago, the TG's budget, he agrees with it in principle. The policy he agrees with in principle. He wishes them luck because he mentioned that Tobago will play a vital role in the development of culture and agriculture, and more so, I suppose, a stimulation of that following our COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on the economy. Tobago was allocated $2.85 billion last year, 260 million for development expenditure. That's 260 million for development expenditure. What is going on with Tobago? 260 million to develop what exactly?
Exactly right. Well, first of all, uh, what Tobago needs is not luck. What it needs is systems and structures that can effectively drive national development. That's what Tobago needs, including proper processes of consultation and dialogue with its citizens and with the citizens in Trinidad and with the government and other institutions in the whole country, including the parliament of Trinidad. You need proper mechanisms to deal with that. And in the absence of that, you're not going to be making any sound decisions whatsoever, right? So that's to put aside the luck part. Now, you cannot finance development. Trinidad, the government in Trinidad isn't just wicked when they give you $300 million. That's what the national government, on the current understanding, can afford. If you understood the constitution reform process differently, you would allocate differently, you would make different decisions in relation to the boundaries So you could go to the country credibly and say, we're going to give Tobago this much more because of this size of the responsibilities it has to exploit the potential it has, and so on. You could do that. In the absence of that kind of constitutional design, you can't fund development in a place like Tobago without different financial institutions. So when I mentioned the communities, for example, you may use limited liability community investment vehicles, what we call in my profession project financing, off budget tools that would encourage people to come and invest in these community driven projects. But that is only possible if you have safe zones and healthy zones with credible projects that would offer services people want to buy, and investors could see could make money. Now, to the extent that you are operating in a world in which you're relying on 300 million, $400 million of investment financing, you are quite right. You will go nowhere with that. That's just the money to buy the drinks for the meetings. That's not about investing to service the development process. So the way we're organizing, the way we're doing things, it's just the wrong way. After 62 years of independence, there is no reason for us to continue with this exhibition of ignorance. It's not necessary. We are locked into the ignorance because we don't talk to one another. We snipe at one another, we complain, we gripe in the media, but we don't have systems to have real dialogue among the citizens where Central could learn from Tobago and Tobago could learn from Central and all of that sort of stuff. We don't have any way to learn from the people in Lavantil what they're really thinking, how they understand things, what they want to do. We just are locked into a cycle of continuing ignorance. The minister, therefore, is similarly locked in. So he is uninformed when he says what is proposed by Fali and his team makes sense. It doesn't make sense. It cannot make sense because it's coming from the executive alone. It's not coming from the people of Tobago. Fali has no way to talk to Tobagonians, except he goes into town meetings. You can't plan and design by instructing people through town meetings. You have to have program systems inside the THA that allows Tobagonians to come and participate in the planning process, gathering full information. We have to have information about what businesses are trying to do, businesses where, businesses of what type. All of that sort of stuff is what you need in order to go to the parliament with sensible plans. So when Kumimbert says he agrees, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know, Fali doesn't know. So he's drinking snake oil rather than drinking the information that the people of Tobago is sending to him about what we're trying to do. And in any event, as I said, none of it really turns on how much money the central government can hand over. Even if we could get the 2 billion from the central government, that isn't enough to diversify and develop an economy that is 140 years in doldrums. Tobago is now able to produce 20% at most of the tax revenues that it's spending. You got to get to a place where you are able to generate almost all and have surpluses for investment. That we are 62 years behind the national economy. Where Tobago is today is where Trinidad and Tobago was at independence. We can't go on like this. And we don't know these things because we're not talking to one another properly about them.
Ay, 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 that's a lot. That's a lot indeed, Dr. James. The thing is, you all that you've covered this morning, you've touched on the orange economy, where you spoke about coming out of communities. We saw chutney, we saw soca, we saw the steel pan. So the orange economy is something, the potential there exists. You also spoke about the blue economy, and that is the potential that exists within Tobago. But there's something that you touched on which not a lot of people are aware of, and that's the purple economy, where they refer to key factors that looked at social issues and structural issues, of which you also touched on this morning. So going forward, Dr. James, going forward, should we see, or should we, and I put the word, forget about expectations, But given what you said this morning, is there anything that could be said different or done different in the budget presentation next week, given our current state of affairs? 1 year ago was an economy in distress. It's still an economy in distress, probably even more stressed. Is there anything else that could be addressed differently on a short-term basis that could lead to long-term development and long-term growth?
Well, to be quite honest and frank with you, the single most important thing that must be provided for in the budget is a proper process of constitutional reform. That's the first and most important thing that must be properly funded. What you have to do, though, is not set up a rowley kind of committee. You have to have, if you want to make decisions about the future of the judiciary, we have a judiciary in place now. They have to be on the committee. Their representatives must be there. If you have an opposition in parliament, their representatives must be there. If you have a Senate, their representatives must be there. These are people experienced in the business of trying to govern the country. You have a Tobago House of Assembly, their reps must be there. And you have the local government bodies. Their reps must be there. At least that design is required for the committee. So it's a negotiating body, right? Where that could pull people into a proper process of sharing what they really want as owners of the country. When you understand that and you put that in place, you have a chance to get everybody involved in working out for the first time where we want to go with our governance arrangements, for what reasons, and so on. And I would fund that properly as the first step. When you get that process in place, the other things will flow from that about where you want to go with your boundaries. You know, the judges would be able quickly to settle the issue of whether setting up proper boundaries for Tobago violates UN clause. There is no such thing. I'm a UN ex-senior policy advisor. The first law I had to study when I went to work in the UN was UN clause. UN clause makes no provisions whatsoever for the internal divisions of a country. None whatsoever. It's an international agreement between countries, whatever your existing boundaries are. So you could take Trinidad and Tobago, give Trinidad 90% of the boundaries and give Tobago 10%. That's still consistent with UN clause. We could do sensible things within the framework of a process that would bring all our experts properly into the process. Ask the judges, they will know. They ask them, what is your opinion about the independence of the judiciary? They will know. What is your opinion about speeding up the process of prosecuting criminals and so on? They will be able to tell you that sort of stuff. You don't need to put a bunch of executive appointees to make proper decisions about the way the whole country has to go. Unrepresentative behavior while we ostensibly are running a representative system of government. Put the government, the whole government that you have in place to work. That will have to be properly funded. That will be item number 1 in my budget. But of course, Homenbot can't do that. He had to persuade Rowley to do it properly. And Rowley ain't gonna want to do that if he keeps to his 2015 mantra that he don't want to change the rules. You follow me? So
I follow you very much. And also, as you said, this is where information-based policy making and data caption will also come into play if you use such structures. Dr. James, this has been a pleasure indeed. I want to thank you very much for joining me on the program this morning for an extended conversation. Really, thank you very much for your time and for
you're very welcome, Peter, and thanks for inviting.
Take care, sir. All the very best. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you learned something from that interview. I hope that you paid attention to this particular interview. Put all politics aside for the moment, because the budget affects every single individual. The budget does not discriminate. Although some might make arguments for that, the budget affects every individual across Trinidad and Tobago, whether it be in different ways. It does. And at the end of the day, if next week Monday comes and you say, nothing new gonna happen, nothing new gonna be different, I ain't even paying attention to the budget. No. It is something that is very important that you should take the time to view. I myself, in my position, I have to watch the budget, and I will admit at times it is very frustrating. The Minister of Finance's preamble is about 4 hours. Last year, the budget started at 1 o'clock. We didn't finish hearing of it until about 6 o'clock in the evening. So, all of that, ladies and gentlemen, you have to. I know it can be frustrating, but particularly to the young people in TNT, you need to focus on what is being said about your financial future. It affects every single individual across the board. It is not something that we can just ignore and brush off. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a break here on AM Prime. We will return shortly as we focus on one avenue that the government is seeking to invest in, well, in respect to development. And it has already gained some fortune with about US $200 million in investments. I'm speaking about special economic zones. But exactly what are SEZs? And exactly how do they work? How is it going to lead to potential growth for TNT? Well, we'll get into that conversation after this. Stay with us.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus, quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Here is your WESN News on the hour. I'm Naomi Macnish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. A deadly gang-related shooting outside Malik Preschool leaves 2 dead and child injured. Marissa Aguilera honored with Hummingbird Medal Gold Award. Water supply disruption in northeast Trinidad for emergency repairs. And internationally, murder of a Paris student sparks immigration debate. Now for the details. Police have confirmed that the fatal shooting outside Roxanne's Learning and Childhood Center in Malik on September 25th was gang-related. 2 men, Gerald and Kimo Kalist, were shot dead when gunmen opened fire around 8:10 a.m. A 4-year-old boy and 3 others were also injured. The child is in stable condition with non-life-threatening injuries. Authorities believe the attack targeted Kimo Kalist, who was known to the police. The Northeastern Division's Victim and Witness Support Unit is offering assistance to the affected families, school staff and students. Cricket West Indies has congratulated former West Indies captain Marisa Aguilera on receiving the Hummingbird Medal Gold Award at the 2024 National Awards. CWI President Dr. Kishore Shalu praised her dedication and contributions to the sport, calling her an inspiration. Aguilera was recognized for her outstanding service to cricket both in Trinidad and Tobago and the West Indies. CWI also acknowledged her ongoing work to develop young athletes in the region. WASA has announced a water supply interruption in parts of northeast Trinidad from 6 p.m. on September 25th to 10 p.m. on September 26th. The disruption is due to emergency repairs on a major transmission pipeline at the North Oropouche Water Treatment Plant. Areas affected include Brazil, La Joquita, Malabar, Sandy Grande, Manzanilla, and others. WASA advises that full service may take up to 24 hours to return after repairs, and a limited truck-borne service is available via their app or website. Internationally, the murder of a 19-year-old student in a wealthy Paris neighborhood has reignited calls for tougher immigration laws in France. Philippine and economics student at Paris Dauphine University was found dead in the Bois de Boulogne Park on Saturday. Her suspected killer, a 22-year-old Moroccan man, was arrested in Geneva. He had previously served 5 years in France for rape and was under an expulsion order that had not been carried out. French politicians, including hardline Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau, are demanding stronger legal measures to protect citizens, while far-right leaders argue this case highlights systemic failures in the judicial system. Philippines' murder has also raised concerns about safety in Bois de Boulogne area, which locals say has become more dangerous in recent years. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for watching.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being with us this morning as we continue the conversation. We're really focusing a lot on education in particular this morning, and we are all learning a lot. I've learned a lot from our last conversation, and I'm pretty sure I'm about to learn a lot more because we're speaking about Special Economic Zones. Special Economic Zones Act of Trinidad and Tobago 2022 was actually fully proclaimed earlier this year. A statement from the Ministry of Trade and Industry at that time explained that the new Special Economic Zones regime represents a holistic investment framework which aims to attract local and international investment. But exactly what are Special Economic Zones? How do they work? Exactly what are the benefits associated with such that aims to attract such investment? I'm joined this morning by a gentleman who is familiar to us here on the program. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the Special Economic Zones Authority, Mr. Stephen DeGans. Good morning, Mr. DeGans, and welcome back to AM Prime. It's good to see you.
Hi, good morning, Keaton. Yeah, good to see you as well. Haven't seen you for a little while, so good to be here working with you and promoting what we do now. So, hi.
Sometime. So thanks for being with us this morning. Mr. Gans, I'll start by asking exactly what are special economic zones? We've heard this term floating around, but not everyone is necessarily aware of exactly what they are.
Well, Keaton, it's you've heard of free trade zones in the past, correct? where you are allowed to bring things in duty-free and you're allowed to sell them out of the country and you have to maintain a certain number of exports. Trinidad had a period of having a free trade zone environment regime. Unfortunately, it is an unfair trading practice. It's recognized as an unfair trading practice worldwide. And if we're going to be able to play on a global scale, which is obviously where our markets have become, we need to get in line with what is allowed so that we can, participate. So economic zones are a little bit different in that they do have a measure of taxation. So there's no unfair taxation that's being executed there. And if you are in an economic zone, you still get some of the benefits that allow you to be prosperous, that help you to be more productive and allow you to be get a little gain on things if you're trying to be in an environment that you need a little help with. So for our economic zones in Trinidad, what we are encouraging companies, new investment in and employment, if they're creating employment, we're looking for that type of, that type of group. We're looking for companies that are coming in here, whether they're foreign or local, and they will come to these economic zones or create a special economic zone of their own, which we will give them a license for. And then they get tax breaks on customs duties coming in, VAT coming in as well. And then they also get a reduction in their corporation tax. So we're looking at, as I said before, trying to encourage investment into the country, whether it be foreign investment or local investment. And we're just trying to create employment for the people in Trinidad and Tobago.
That being said, for clarification, you said it repeals the refusal, but is the special economic zones, is it a geographical location in itself?
Well, that's a great question because that's something we get all the time. You do have some areas that are geographic in that, well, every economic zone must be a geographic location, but there are some that we are looking to create that will be existing, and we'll hear more about it after the budget because it will be announced in the budget. But there will be some areas that are going to be created by Ministry of Trade and the government as economic zones physically. So there will be some areas that are demarcated, especially as economic zone. They're going to be designated as economic zones. But if you have a large business or you'd like to set up a large business on a virgin piece of territory, maybe in Charlieville, there's a piece of land that you want to set something up, maybe a manufacturing company or something like that. You can apply to the Special Economic Zone Authority for that area to be designated as a zone, and then you become a single zone enterprise. We call the businesses that operate in these economic zones enterprises. So you'll be given the designation of a single zone enterprise where you'll be participating by doing one of 12 different items. In the act, you'll see the 12 different items, but they can be manufacturing, agro-processing, fishing, energy, renewable energy development. There are 12 different areas, manufacturing and distribution, lots of different areas, 12 actually. And you can set up a separate business off of one of the designated zones, and that will allow you to have that area through an application to us as a designated zone, and you then receive all the benefits of the SEZ. Special economic zones.
What about businesses previously under the Free Zones Act? How do they now transition to the special economic zones?
Well, that's a statement that comes up, and there's no transition. That's not to say that you won't be allowed to be in the special economic zones, but there's no transition, automatic transition from the free trade zone into the economic zone. You really do need to fill out a new application. You do go there, you fill it out, and you go through the process. As I said before, the criteria would be one of two things. Well, actually, both of two things. One would be the level of investment that you're putting out, and it would be guided by over the next 2-year period. And because, as you mentioned, it was Special Economic Zone Act of 2022, that was when it was first put forward. It was fully proclaimed on the 5th of July, 2024. But nevertheless, we're giving businesses who were starting that the opportunity to talk about their investments over the last 2-year period. And that would be considered part of their investment going into the economic zone. So for the period, you're actually getting 4 years to tell us what your investment has been instead of 2 years, which is what we really would look someone that's coming into business now. And yes, you can be considered an economic zone after that period, provided you're doing both of two things. One, the investment, and that will determine whether you're a small, medium, or large enterprise. or even a single zone enterprise, or even an operator, which we'll talk about right after this. And it'll also be predicated by the number of people that you're employing. If you're employing one person, well, it's a little harder to get an economic zone status for one person, whereas if you're looking for 50 people to provide employment for in Trinidad, then you can have a greater chance of becoming an economic zone enterprise.
Mm-hmm. Now, you just mentioned a couple of terms there, which you spoke. Yes, if you will, you know exactly what I'm going to go on.
I did say some things in there that I said I would come back to. There are three types of applications we're looking to give licenses for. One would be an enterprise where you are operating on an existing economic zone designated area. And I'll just give you an example. Let's say someone came along, let's say we designated an e-tech park, for instance, in Tamina Park, which was really done for technology and education in that area. If we were designating that area as an economic zone, and I had an industry that I wanted to set up in that area, then I would be an enterprise because I'm operating in an existing economic zone. The second one, which we briefly spoke about, would be a single zone enterprise, where if I had a huge building and I decided I wanted to fill that with a call center that was doing outbound calling for the US or inbound receiving calls and doing different things for world status or world production, answering questions and things like that, a technology center or a business product center, as it's called, BPOs, then I would set that up, or I would apply to have that set up as a single zone, because it's no longer inside of one of the designated zones. So that area is now designated as a zone, and then the enterprise that is operating in that zone is now considered a special economic zone, a single zone enterprise. And then there's a third level of investment that you can make where I decide I have a piece of land and I want to apply to the authority to operate a special economic zone, which would be similar to what I just mentioned in the e-tech area. So that area now would then, I go and I apply to the town and country planning for a business type environment or a business park, whether it be manufacturing or anything like that. And I then ask them for economic zone status. I'm granted that. And then the people who come in to use that facility will automatically be allowed into an economic zone. That doesn't mean they will be an enterprise. They must complete the application to also become an enterprise that is going to be operating in that zone. But they're now in a protected area or an economic zone. And then when they operate in there, they just have to get the economic zone license, their enterprise license, so that they can be able to benefit from the reduction in taxes and the VAT, as well as the corporation tax reduction.
But in that regard, what is the overall benefit to Trinidad and Tobago? How does this actually give some sort of benefit to our economy?
Well, there are a couple of ways. First of all, I am going to be encouraging investment. We heard from the Minister of Finance, and we even heard it from the Prime Minister recently, where he talked about people having money in their accounts and they're not doing very much with it. Not quite sure how he would have received that information, but nevertheless, he has maybe has a feeling that there's a lot of money that's not being circulated in Trinidad. And when money works, then you get the benefits of it. If it's kept in a box under your mattress or kept somewhere, it's not really benefiting the whole country. So he's really trying to encourage locals to spend the money to generate some activity in the economy. That's one way. Of course, secondly, we're looking for foreign direct investment. Trinidad has had foreign direct investment, but primarily in the energy sector. The special economic zones are going to try to encourage people to invest in other areas besides the energy, because this is actually not aimed for energy companies. This is aimed for other companies in, like one of these, I said 12 different areas that are coming in here in non-energy sector type environments. So we're encouraging investment from local or foreign, and of course the foreign will be bringing US dollars. So we're having a little strain on getting US currency at the moment. This will encourage that type of investment into Trinidad as well. So that's the major thing, investment. The second area that it benefits the country is employment. If I come in here and I'm looking to employ 100 people or 200 people or 50 people or anything like that, that's 50 less people or 100 less people who are unemployed. And the money is coming in from another source, or it's built on money that's being out of exports or out of production in general. So I am now not just investing in the country and earning profits, but I'm also employing people and helping them in their own families. So that's the two-edged benefit of the economic zone. And of course, there are lots of other small benefits to the country. For instance, as I said, in the event that you're exporting, you're going to be earning US dollars. In the event that we get foreign direct investment, that's also US dollars. So, or foreign dollars anyway, it could be UK, it could be anywhere else out of the world, really. So anything like that is bringing foreign currency into the country, which is beneficial, and of course, employing people in the country as well. We also look for the type of person who's raising the standard of the type of employment. So there's basic employment where you're just doing a normal cottage industry type in small, low-level skills. We're hoping that we can attract, because of our labor pool being quite educated labor pool and skilled, we're hoping we can attract a slightly higher level of employment as well. So it will not just be a labor pool of basics, but people who will be able to do far more than that. And that will also allow you to upskill and learn and train and all the benefits of the good type of education and that we've been having in Trinidad. We're also going to try to reward that by getting good jobs for those people as well.
Have we already seen the benefits of special economic zones and those impacts? Have we already seen that happening in TNT?
Well, yes, but let's go back to the 80s. You remember you might be too young to remember the 80s. You might say, that.
I can talk to the 80s music, but nothing else.
Yeah, so in the 80s, we were there was a time when we were really good on our production. We were not allowed to import very many things. We didn't have the foreign exchange to import very many things. So when we opened up the markets, that changed, but we had to survive ourselves. So a lot of companies went into manufacturing and export. And back in those days, you could go to any Caribbean islands and then eventually in the US and UK and see our products on shelves in groceries. So it was very encouraging. In fact, it was a little disappointing sometimes because sometimes when you did manage to get a trip out of the country and you went away, when you went foreign, you looked to try and buy some of the products that you were not accustomed to seeing. But if you went to a lot of the Caribbean islands, you just saw all our products on their shelves. So it's kind of like, well, it's the same thing I get at home. Where's the variation? But it speaks to how the manufacturing sector did so well at that time of our lives. And we were really producing a lot. We also had the foreign direct investment coming in to the Point Lisas area, which was being developed. And that was also where we were getting a lot of gas, and we were spending money and getting investments in there, producing methanol, producing nitrogen, things like that. So that was a growth period of Trinidad. So we did see not an economic zone, but those people did get tax breaks and they did get benefits at the time. We have not had the economic zone in Trinidad until July 5th. That's when we started really being allowed to have, well, it was then proclaimed. So that's when the actual, the whole allowance, being allowed to be in an economic zone came to pass. We have a couple applications in hand, and we should be giving out licenses fairly soon. The whole process takes about 10 weeks, 3 months kind of thing to get an economic zone license. By the time we look at your application and pass through all the different various bodies, we have to go to the town and country, we have to go to the EMA, we have to make sure that your application is as it says, and it's not going to be causing problems to Trinidad in the long run. So once we do that, you get your license and you continue your development until there's a time when you can produce. You can start hiring people in the case of a business process organization. You can start building your buildings so that you can get the tax breaks. You can start importing your machinery and things like that in the case of manufacturing or production. So you get those things, but you need to have the license before. If you don't have the license, then you won't get the tax breaks at the border. So we don't have any in Trinidad as yet. We're looking to license some people, hopefully in the next maybe couple of weeks. And if that's the case, then we should start seeing the benefits. One of those people is looking to hire quite a few Trinidadians. So that will be a good help to some of our university students because they're looking for slightly skilled people, not top of the line graduates, but certainly people who have had a formal education.
Well, that's excellent. So we see the potential that exists there also for development. But you also mentioned 10 weeks. That's actually quite good. It also speaks to the ease of doing business. This is something that will lead to more productivity and efficiency.
Yes. So we are trying really hard to make sure that we do not keep back the business process. We want to make sure that people can get these licenses quickly. So we encourage you, if you are going to be trying to get a license from the Special Economic Zone, there's a TT BizLink site that you go to, you type in SEZA, which would be Special Economic Zone Authority, and you'll be given the application form. I also encourage anybody who is interested in becoming an economic zone license holder to please read the act. It's about 50 or 60 pages, but please read the act so you can see the benefits. You can see the type of business that you would like to apply for the license of, and then you'll be able to determine whether you really are really a good candidate for a license. Because not everyone should be an economic zone like enterprise. Some people really do not need the benefits. I mean, everybody wants to get reduced taxation, everybody wants to get VAT and customs duty off, but maybe in your case, it's not something that would really long-term benefit your organization, because there are some stipulations as well. We do require that you give us some more information about your business on an ongoing basis. Every 6 months, you need to supply your financials, and we have to make sure that you're staying on top of your business product, your business plan that you would have submitted to us in the very start. There are fees associated with the economic zone, but they're not anything as large as the customs that you'd be saving or the VAT that you would be not claiming anymore. So there are some benefits, but there are some fees. So in a case where you're borderline, you may not really want to be going through all the additional rigors that you have to do just to be able to be a special economic zone. You're not saving that much in some cases. So, and you're not providing employment, so you probably will not get an economic zone license in a case like that. So those are the real things we're looking for: investment and employment, both of them.
And just to clarify, just to get up, it has to be known that not every business will be eligible to participate in the SEZ regime, and this is just based off of what you just said.
Yeah, definitely not every business would be eligible, but more than that, not every business would want to be in a special economic zone. Just because you're looking at the reduced taxation, or just because you're looking at the benefits of reduced customs. For instance, let me give you an example. We can set this up for small people. We don't want to disenfranchise any of the businesses in Trinidad that want to make an investment. So we are allowing small businesses to join as well. So there is an economic zone type, and then you can go into one of the enterprise locations, and you can, and specially designated locations, and you can set up a business inside of there. But if you're making so little that, yes, you have a reduction in tax, but your whole, it now requires you to submit certain forms on a biannual basis, so not biannual, rather, well, twice a year actually. So semi-annually, you have to submit these bits of business, your financials and things like that to the authority, and have us go through the compliance to make sure that you're doing what you say you're going to do. You may not want to have something like that, and the benefit to you may be so small you decide that it really doesn't make sense, because our entry in that case could be as small as making $250,000 a month. That would be your sales for the month. Sales of $250,000, sorry, for the year, $250,000 for the year, which works out to be $20,000 a month. For a really small business, that's great, but for an average size business, that's really very small. So if you were to come in there, theoretically speaking, a doubles vendor could very well be making $20,000 a month in products that they sell. Do they really want to be in economic zone? No, that's not ready for that. They don't want the paperwork. They don't want to apply for things like that. They may not even be declaring tax in some cases, and I'm not condoning that, but I'm just saying this is something that may happen. So you don't really want to be in an economic zone in a case like that. But we do cater for it for businesses that start small with plans to grow larger. So if I wanted to start with a business that was doing $250,000 and maybe hiring 20 people, but then I have dreams and plans in the next 3 years that I will grow to $1 million a year in turnover and have 50 people employed, definitely would like to have you in this zone, because you're looking to grow and employ people.
Hence why submitting the business plan is important. Hence why submitting your financials is important. Because
exactly. So we need to see where you're going, not just where you are right now, but where you're going in the next couple of years. And we want to encourage that growth, because we want businesses to thrive. We want them to do really well and grow, because that's how the country grows.
Mr. Digans, once more, if you can, just relay where people can get more information, please. I know that you mentioned TT BizLink. If you can just once more stress that point.
Right. So we have two ways of getting the information. I think you might be hearing my police blower outside, and I'm hoping they're not hearing it.
No, we're not. You're good.
Oh, good. So we have two ways of getting the information. What we can do is one of two ways. One, go on to you can actually just go onto the internet and type SEZA, Special Economic Zone Authority. We call it ourselves CEZA. And you can just type that into Google, and you will you'll get the information on the special economic zones, as well as the application forms, which you can download depending on one of the three categories. One would be an enterprise in a location. One is a single zone where you're operating outside of one of the designated areas, and the third would be an operator. So you can do that. You can go into there. I would encourage everyone to read the Act as well, so that you can see what the benefits are and you can see what some of the regulations would be. And then there's a third way, which is to call the office, which is 226-5593. Also, that number is also on the internet. You will be able to see that number, to see that that's a number to call to get additional information. But it really would be best if you look at the information before calling in, so that you have some idea of what you're looking to try and achieve. And you'll know some educated questions we'll be very happy to help you with. But if you're calling us to find out the absolute basics, well, then it is going to take a little bit longer. So it is better if you educate yourself a little bit before you call in to find out the details. But those are the two best ways to find out about it.
Indeed. Mr. DeGans, I want to thank you very much for joining us on the program this morning. Thank you very much for your time, and all the very best to you, to the entire team at CEZA. We appreciate your time and efforts, and we look forward to more good things to come.
Thank you very much. I look forward to building some business in Trinidad as well. We need a boost in our economy. It's always nice to get an injection every now and then. And I hope that the CEZA can help that for the country's benefit. And of course, looking for employment. We don't want to have people just idly sitting by. We want to have them employed and feeling productive as well. So thanks a lot for the opportunity, for allowing me to promote this, to talk about CEZA's opportunities on air.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much. All the very best.
Have a good day. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we all share Mr. DeGans' hopes as well. We all want to boost our economy, and we certainly hope that CEZA leads to such. It is only something that we can hope for, but the work that is being done to lead to such, we can only champion. And again, it's always very good to have an idea of what is taking place. I myself was not necessarily fully aware of exactly what special economic zones are. So you see, we learn a lot. But if you want more information as to whether or not a special economic zone license could benefit you, or whether or not you're eligible for it, you can visit. Just Google, as Mr. DeGans said, SEZA, CEZA, the Special Economic Zones Authority, where you can get more information. And you should really act. The Act is available online. It's the Special Economic Zones Act 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we end AM Prime. It has been a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining me on the program this morning. Thank you to all my guests for their presence and for their time. And ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed the program, and we hope you have a very good day ahead. To my team at WESN, and Ryan, Gomez, Burke, and Milewood, thank you very much for your continued hard work and efforts in ensuring that AM Prime goes live every day. To Naomi McNish, who's our news anchor, but also the producer of AM Prime, thank you very much for your time and hard work as always. I'm Keaton Shaw, reminding you today is a good day to have a good day, and we'll see you again very, very soon. Stay tuned for Talking Point after this break.
WESN.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Nah, you don't need to register nothing. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are infinite